over the next 5 years. Although I have to throw into this as well, the only reason why PDIP is not known for corruption right now is because it's not in government. That sounds cynical, but it's just a realistic position. There are lots of people in PDIP who are just waiting for the opportunity to become ministers or secgens and so forth in these various ministries, and they're going to milk the system for all they can get out of it once they do that. And so we will begin to hear stories about PDIP corruption. And then there's going to be this tension between Jokowi, the genuinely honest guy who's trying to govern, but is being confronted by his own subordinates or, members of parliament and so forth who are engaging in corrupt acts.
Hi, thank you. Sean Levine from Eurasia Group, the Indonesian analyst. It's good to see you again in D.C., not New York. Following up on that last question, given the market expectations of a Joko Widodo victory, and we'll probably see that before August 21st, a lot of people seem to set aside or seem to forget the fact that Joko Widodo has actually been driven to this rise of success, in a sense, by the elites. Yusuf Kala brought him from Solo. He was supported by Prabowo in Jakarta. How effective do you think Joko Widodo is going to be as president, considering he's going to have to face a very unruly parliament? I mean, outside of this coalition he has now, he has to bring on more partners. He's already said he's willing to do so. He doesn't have control of the Speaker of the House in Parliament now. Might not get that given the rule change that they made on Election Day. How effective do you think he's going to be actually in pushing for the reforms that are necessary for Indonesia? I mean, we're talking about fuel subsidies, unwinding regulatory uncertainty, both in the central government as well as the regional governments, which have a great deal of tension because of decentralization. Do you think he's going to live up to market expectations, or are we going to see a honeymoon period and then it's back to normal in Indonesia, very similar to Yudhoyono's last 5 years?
Yeah. Well, I would start that by saying that I don't think he's basically a product of the elites. Yes, in the Jakarta gubernatorial election, if he hadn't had some support from Prabowo's vice gubernatorial candidate, Ahok, and so forth, so that was a part of the coalition and so forth. But yes, you don't rise in Indonesian politics unless you have some support from somebody with money and other resources. But the main story about Jokowi, as I said at the beginning from Saiful Mujani, is that this is an ordinary guy who has been able to convince enough Indonesians of his political abilities to elect him president. And the main thing to see here is not a tool of elites, but somebody who has risen from below. Now, at the same time, that rise did look pretty meteoric, and it did appear to slow. This is less, SBY had a similar kind of rise, starting at the time that he left Megawati's cabinet. And it was really remarkable to watch how SBY rose in the polls and so forth. Again, I think this was driven by, Indonesia is a media-saturated place. So people are watching SBY all over the country. Supposedly, he was very attractive to middle-class, middle-aged ladies, right? I could never understand that myself, but then I'm not a middle-class, middle-aged lady. So, but there's a lot of this kind of independent going on. This is not backroom kind of politics that explains much of SBY's rise. So Jokowi begins to tail off. And I think myself, I watch those debates, and that's my first real exposure to Jokowi too. And I think to myself, oh goodness, his voice is so flat. He's just so full of concrete type examples. He's not an inspiring speaker and stuff like that. And Prabowo seemed to me to be doing better at that. So this is. Jokowi seems to have done great as mayor of Solo. He seems to have been doing great enough as governor of Jakarta. We could talk about particular issues where he performed well there. But now this huge challenge. So will he do it? Will he be able to dominate PDIP? Will he be able to sideline Puan, the daughter of Megawati, for example? I mean, there are all these kinds of issues. And I don't have any answer to those questions except so far so good. Basically, if you think about Puan, we take this on a day-to-day basis. Puan, Megawati's daughter, wanted to be his Jokowi's vice presidential candidate. She lobbied her mother. Jokowi lobbied her mother, and Jokowi won. Puan this is pretty important, right? I mean, who opposes mom? especially in Indonesia. And mom was president. Puan wanted to be Jokowi's campaign manager in the presidential election. Jokowi went to Megawati and said no, and he won. So I read these are tea leaves, and I look at those tea leaves and I think, aha, 2 points for Jokowi here. So, but we have to take this on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, right here. Yes, identify yourself.
Hello, I'm Kevin Lees. I run the website Suffragio about global electoral politics. I'd like to follow that up a little bit about Megawati's influence in the coming administration. Obviously, we've just seen after a decade of pretty ineffective role in India, how paralyzed government can become when you have a prime minister and a party leader sort of at contretemps. And in that situation, Sonia Gandhi, very credibly had more power than Manmohan Singh. I don't think anyone expects that level of power from Megawati, but it's very clear that, it was her decision in the spring to allow the PDIP to nominate Jokowi as the presidential candidate. Right. What role will she have going forward in formulating policy and making personnel decisions over the coming months? As you say, these are tea leaves, but, what insights do you have and what are your expectations of her role over the next 5 years?
Well, we have to look at the cabinet choices first to see that. She has some buddies in the military, for example, Megawati. Ria Mizard, who was promoted for many months as a leading choice for the vice presidency, probably because he's a buddy of Megawati's. Hendro Priyono, whose a record as an intelligence officer raises some questions. These people may get appointed to positions like Minister of Defense or something like that. And then if that happens, then we know right away that this is Megawati's influence. What I read is all of the debate is about the professionalism of the cabinet. So we're going to see now who gets appointed. The first news about the cabinet, incidentally, was that they were going to have an announcement of the members of the cabinet after Eid al-Fitr, after the end of the fasting month. And I thought, holy smokes, that's only 2 or 3 weeks from now. But the more recent thing, this is typical, right, in new government. Yusuf Kala said before inauguration. So that's more likely to happen in October, David. This is the latest on this, is that the announcement of cabinet, major cabinet appointments will take a while. But anyway, we're going to be looking at those. And if really the economics positions, if the economic type ministries are really held by the people that we think they will be, then it doesn't indicate one thing or another about Megawati's influence, because Megawati herself had such ministers when she was president. But it will at least indicate that the two of them are making good choices. Dede Basri, for example, Khatib Basri, what kind of position is he going to have? That kind of thing. But we just have to look. But so far, I see this anxiety, and I have many Indonesian friends. Well, Indonesian voters think that many of them think that Jokowi is going to be controlled by her. But I don't think so. I think he's going to be I think he's going to be his own person, but I don't have enough supportive data for that position yet.
You had your
I don't think Megawati's interested in policy.
So this is somebody you know Megawati better than me, right? I mean, you've spent more time with her and so forth than I have. I mean, I've been with her a couple of times, but I wouldn't say I'm a buddy of Megawati exactly.
I'm not a buddy, but I've seen her enough to know that she never
Cares about policy, right? Right. Good, Barbara. Thank you. That's a good intervention. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Charles Ham from Hope Worldwide. What intrigued me with this, as you mentioned, the tea leaves, I have a question. As we see that Prabowo, as a man who was dedicated to become a president one day, actually, even if, let's say, he failed, he actually is getting closer to his passion. So do you think with the coalition that they have, will they be able to create a power to change the election law and weaken Jokowi in the next 5 years, let's say, Prabowo get married and looks good on the women and get more votes.
His ex-wife looks great to me still when she's up there on the
But what's his
campaign
chance?
platform.
What is his chance for 5 years down the road? What do you think? We all know all presidents elected,
Right.
and their approval rating go down for whatever reason. Most presidents go through that. Whatever depends on the cabinet,
Right,
as you
of course,
mentioned.
of course.
But what's your chance? What's the chance for Prabowo 5 years down the road? If he makes his moves rightly, he might be closer to what he really wants to.
Yeah. So it's extraordinary that Prabowo has always apparently. I mean, these are the family lore stories, LORE lore stories. That Prabowo's expectation was that he would be president. This was what his father wanted. It's like Joe Kennedy and Jack Kennedy, that kind of stuff, that kind of family dynasty. And so he was fated. And then you throw a little Javanese mysticism in there, in addition, and they're really sure that they're reading talk about tea leaves, they're reading the signs from the stars and stuff, and he's going to be president. But he actually did come very close to achieving it. 47% is an amazing thing, to my mind, for somebody who has such problems in his personal past, that he could have gotten that far. So if he were smart, as you say, I think he should try to organize an opposition, a loyal opposition in Parliament, and then watch. It's like the Republicans have been doing, during the Obama presidency, organizing to take over when Obama is done, either 5 years or 10 years from now. If Prabowo, and that might be healthy for the country, to have an opposition that is, checking on what Jokowi is doing all the time. I don't think that's the direction in which Prabowo is heading. I think the direction in which he is heading is self-destructive. But we'll see how this, I don't have to elaborate on it any further, I don't think. We'll see how it plays out after tomorrow. But he needs to accept the system if he's going to play within it. I guess that's the short answer.
On the back.
Thank you, Professor. My name is Jeannie Nguyen with Voice of Vietnamese Americans. How would you see the new president, Jokowi Dodo, lead the country, and how would that impact the regional situation, since we're now expecting Indonesia to carry the leadership to support the peace and security of that whole region and its role in ASEAN? Thank you.
Yeah. I think Jokowi's main interests are domestic. So we don't know very much about what he's going to do in foreign policy. There was a foreign policy debate, and Prabowo asked him the question about the South China Sea. We see that China is getting more aggressive, Prabowo said, in the South China Sea. What will you do about it if you become president, Jokowi? And Jokowi answered, well, to begin with, Indonesia does not have a conflict with China. Indonesia itself does not have a conflict with China. Now, I myself don't think that's right. There are conflicts with China, and I don't know why Jokowi answered that way. But anyway, most of the conflicts are, to be sure, with other countries, with Vietnam and the Philippines and so forth. And so what Jokowi said was, we would try to play the role of honest broker. To the extent to which we are a powerful, a large country in the region, we would try to be an intermediary between China and Vietnam, or China and the Philippines. Prabowo appeared to be pushing him to take a more aggressive, Sukarnoist kind of stance. But Prabowo himself didn't take that position. He just seemed, from the tone of his question, to be pushing Jokowi in that direction. And Jokowi answered with a soft answer. Now, they were also asked about how they compared their foreign policies with Yudhoyono's. And Prabowo answered that first, I think. And he said, President Yudhoyono says that Indonesia has 1,000 friends and 0 enemies. That's the cliche of Indonesian foreign policy under Yudhoyono. And Prabowo said, I agree with that. And this was a kind of narrative of Prabowo's debate style. He said, whenever I agree with anybody, I'm upfront about it. And in this case, I agree with Yudhoyono. And then, Jokowi said something similar.